How successful can Nico Iamaleava be immediately at UCLA? And how much will those incoming spring transfers alongside him help right away? We'll answer that today on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. It's your team every day. Welcome back, everydayers. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Well, we're getting right to it. We're talking recruiting for UCLA spring portal transfers. What is it going to look like for the Bruins? Is Nico the real deal? We're bringing on Locked On's The Portal podcast host, Brian Smith, to talk everything about the NIL, talk about the transfer portal. Mostly, what does he think about Nico? We'll talk about that today on Locked On UCLA. And with no further ado, let's bring on Brian. We've got Brian Smith from the Portal podcast. Seems like he's on every show around the Locked On network. Brian, it's a pleasure finally getting you on this show, Locked On UCLA. Welcome aboard.
Appreciate it, man. It would be great for UCLA to be what I remember it when I was a kid. They had this quarterback that was good in the 80s. His name was Troy Aikman. That's right. They've had some good teams since, but it's time for UCLA to make some moves. Hopefully it's sooner rather than later.
Well, Deshaun Foster has made his move in the spring portal offseason, which is as crazy as it gets. They've moved their win total on FanDuel to 5.5. We're going to start and focus a lot on Nico Iamaleava. So, Brian, you've seen him, the recruiting process, maybe know a little bit behind the scenes, and mostly, is this kid ready to succeed at UCLA? Let's kind of start with that.
He is a great guy to be around, personality-wise, very gregarious, happy-go-lucky. So anybody that runs into Nico, he's not what he's portrayed as, especially by the people in Knoxville, Tennessee. The people around him, that's a different deal. So let's separate the two parts. Now, as far as his abilities, he's got arguably the strongest arm I've ever seen out of the high school ranks. He could throw it through a wall. He could when he was a sophomore in high school, and he knows it. But it's just learning the post-snap progressions and how to use his eyes to move the safeties, all the little craftsmanship types things that you would think of when Tom Brady, he did it again, or somebody like that just was crafty. Those are the areas that he needs to work on. And above all else, especially in critical moments, Nico sometimes, even though he's an unbelievable athlete, I'm sure you know this, he's an incredible volleyball player and all that. Sometimes you just got to sit in the pocket, make the reads, be patient, and hit the guy. I don't think he's always patient with himself and the players around him, and that's probably the biggest thing. And now, remember, he was only a second-year college player last year at the University of Tennessee. Does he have the ability to take another jump? Yeah. The difference between a first-year starter at the college level and second, you can go through for 50 years. Compare the stats of the first year and the second. It's usually a large jump. The question is, can he do that with no springtime at UCLA? Different roster, different level of line, different level of all kinds of stuff, because UCLA's, in my opinion, in flux with their roster. Spring portals, and we'll talk about consistently throughout this pod, will be denoted. I have no idea. You're throwing him into an elixir that we're not sure what it's going to taste like. So he's going to learn on the fly. So the best thing that Nico can do is this summer is get as many reps as possible. He takes care of himself. He's in great shape. Like the guys, he's exactly what you're looking for athletically, but it's just the reps, because there's no way you're going to have more talent than him walking in the door on the first day of practice for the Bruins. But quarterback's about above the shoulders and experience within the offense. That last part, he has none. So he's got to make up for a lot of lost time. That is hard, man. Not getting any spring reps, but being expected to be the quarterback in the Big Ten. Not exactly enviable, Zach. Not exactly.
It's not. But I guess the big thing is spring practice overrated, right? Because he was practicing with Tennessee pretty much up until their spring game, and then everything fell apart. And next thing you know, he's going to UCLA. You have Tennessee that's on a semester system. You got UCLA in a quarter system. So he was done with classes. UCLA is still in classes. So he can spend all this time preparing and learning the offense. How much do you think it takes? As you mentioned, one of the knocks on him is his post-snap reads. How can he learn an offense in the summer? Is that doable, or are the Bruins in for some disaster in the early parts of 2025?
It is doable, but it depends on how much they want to throw on his plate, too. It's one thing to have a playbook. Now, how much are you going to make him try and learn? From my experience, this goes one of two ways. Coaches are the most stubborn people on planet Earth. The word change is a 4-letter word to them. They want it exactly their way at all times, no exceptions. They don't care if there's a hurricane out there. It's not how it works in this circumstance. So if they reduce it a little bit, let Nico focus on what he likes from the playbook, and of course the guys around him, they should be fine. If they try to force feed him, it will be a disaster. This will not be a Nico problem. This will be a coach's. It'll be obvious too. You'll be able to tell by his body language where he's throwing, etc. If they keep it simple, and especially if they run RPO, he's a really good athlete now. Like, he can move. If they do that, UCLA should have some explosive moments on offense. I don't think he's going to mind the challenge because, remember, he's an athlete and he likes to be challenged. He's been told he wasn't as good as he should have been, this and that, like Tennessee fans hating on him and all this stuff. Got America hating on him. Again, I don't think this is a Nico problem. I think other people around him. But at the same time, he's really good. He's going to be ticked. I can just tell you that from meeting him a few times, like being around him. He's not a guy that's going to take this line down. He's going to be motivated. So I expect him to be pretty good as long as they don't force feed like this, the New York City playbook on him. You know what I mean? Like something that big. Keep it simple, stupid. The old saying, KISS, is probably what I would do if I was UCLA. And then you just add in, like you get to the fourth game, the fifth game. Every team you see, there should be a bunch of new formations / plays so they don't see it. Only Nico does in the team that's the Bruins in practice until Saturday. Every week should be something new to give you an edge. That way it's not too much.
And maybe the benefit for UCLA, they get Utah to start the season. You go to UNLV, which is interesting with Dan Mullen over there. You play New Mexico, Northwestern, who I would think is maybe one of the bottom dwellers of the Big Ten this year.
Yep.
That's probably a manageable schedule those first 4 weeks with a bye mixed in there before UCLA gets to host Penn State. I would think that would be a fascinating chance for Nico to build gradually. And school at UCLA doesn't start till mid to late September. So that's a lot of time for him to learn the offense. But then, as you mentioned, the post-snap reads going from the simple, stupid, the complexity. You go from as complex of an offense as it gets from Eric Bieniemy a year ago. And then you bring in Tino Sunseri, who's supposed to be that QB guru, if you will, that co-OC at Indiana. And now bringing in Nico, 6'6", 24/7 Sports listed him as the freaks list, right? Because he's just got all those intangibles. He's got all of it. So I guess one final question before we head to break here is, what are the strengths that Nico has shown? I know he's put up big numbers against bad teams, mediocre numbers against some of the better teams in the SEC, a pretty dreadful performance against Ohio State, but even Oregon had dreadful numbers against Ohio State. Most teams had bad numbers against Ohio State as they romped their way to a national championship. What are the strengths for Nico that he can bring beyond just the intangibles on the field?
I think his ability to be mobile and extend plays, it's kind of a cliche now, but his ability to do it, especially at 6'6" with his vision, will be very, very important. I think he will make, again, another year in the system of just being a quarterback in general. Forget the part he was a Ball, now he's a Bruin. He's going to be more comfortable. You're going to see more plays that are busted. They go for big yardage, or this is just as important. This was one of my favorite sayings. Nick Saban used to say it. I don't care if a drive ends in a punt, a field goal, or an extra point. It better not end in a turnover. Throw the thing away. Sometimes the best play is 0. Nico didn't always make 0 last year. Sometimes he tried to put it in harm's way, and he even got away with a few that should have went the other direction, especially in the SEC. If he just throws it away and then occasionally goes and gets you 5-10 yards to pick up first downs, UCLA's offense will be so annoying to defend. They've got some talent. They're not unbelievable. They're certainly not Ohio State 2024, but they have enough talent. You add Nico in, they're going to cause some problems. And again, his arm strength, he's going to make some throws. You're like, no, don't. Oh, never mind. He's going to make a few of those throws because his arm's insane. So it'll be interesting to see how he does.
And talking about building up the roster around him, the Bruins have brought in so much in the spring portal. I'm not sure we've seen a team do so much in the spring window as much as UCLA, like bring in a quarterback, take him out, bring in a new quarterback, set up the future. And we'll talk all about that next on Locked On UCLA. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances, because Monarch Money, it's not just another budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, spending in one place, so you just stop managing your money and you start building wealth. For me, when I start using Monarch, I'm like, wait a minute. Why am I spending so much on food delivery? And why am I spending all this amount of money on entertainment? And now I budget smarter, save more, and still get all the above. You can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use this code, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year. Go check out Monarch Money. All right, moving on to the second segment of sorts here with Locked On UCLA. Zach, with Brian Smith, who's seemingly locked on everything. I know you challenged Spencer in terms of the locked on everything part of that, but you bring in, I would think, a lot more knowledge, cough Spencer, and a vast knowledge of everything recruiting-wise. That's why you have the Portal podcast. Where else can everybody find you before we head into segment 2?
I also do Locked On Seminoles. To say the least, that was an interesting 2024 season for all the wrong reasons. You can find us anywhere on social media, X, Instagram, and all that. So Locked On the Portal is the same place you can find all the places for UCLA, of course, Spotify, Apple, and all that too. It's a lot of fun, but very busy right now because we just started the recruiting season. From now until mid-July. Every day is commitment day.
It is seemingly UCLA doing a lot with the 2026, but first they spent the majority of the spring in the transfer portal window, which normally everybody does in the winter. UCLA did certainly a lot of that, but upwards of 16, maybe more, in the transfer portal in the spring window. What do you think of UCLA going so much into the portal in the spring? You have a whole spring practice schedule, and then you bring in like almost 20 guys. According to Rivals, it's top 5. According to 24/7 Sports, it's top 20. That's a big gap in terms of what you think they're bringing in. What do you think, Brian, as the host of the Portal podcast with this knowledge that the Bruins are bringing in? Is it good or bad?
I think it's needed is probably the biggest thing. They lost a lot of guys. You and I were talking about this. Needed defensive help, etc. They got some good players committed for like 26, and that's great. But they needed help now. Those kids ain't going to be here till next year. So they went out and addressed some linemen, some variety. But in totality, it's still 30 players. That's a high number, man. Did they spend their money correctly? Did they get all the positions? Did they get enough high-end talent? I question all of that at least a little bit. But at the same time, they had so many players leave, they had to do it. So my question for you is probably the biggest thing, did they get enough high-end guys? In other words, did they have the NIL to do it? And the answer is?
I would say they spent a lot of it on Nico. Maybe he fell into their lap. And then I think a sneaky steal was Javian Thomas from Cal. But I think that's going to be the thread. That's going to be the theme of this. UCLA probably didn't get the high end. It's a lot of, did they steal the right guys? Did they get those 3 stars ready to turn into those 4 stars that are cheaper? And what I've tried to talk about in this podcast too is you could go through Southern California in the high school ranks or just locally, and you'll find a lot of talent. You're probably getting the same thing. Florida and other states, California is one of those states you find a bunch of talent. UCLA doesn't have to go far for it. It's just, did they pick the right guys? Other than Nico, the big name isn't there, but I think Javian Thomas would be one of those guys. But then the rest of them, they all got to grow. And Deshaun Foster kept them together despite a terrible start in 2024. But you got to take that next step in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, I think, like Thomas, that's a kid who could really run. So I think that's a really high-end player. But did they get enough, especially on defense, that can be game wreckers? Like UCLA's had a few guys in the last few years. You're like, okay, that's a dude. He's going to play in the NFL, et cetera, et cetera. But to really get to the next level as a team, it's about depth, rotating guys in. I think it's Pete Carroll's teams and like Donahue's teams, UCLA in the late 80s, early 90s, those kind of teams. They had players coming off the bench that were as good as yours, especially on defense. They could chase, they could rush the passer, they could drop 7 and just rush forward and get in your face. I need to see that from UCLA, and part of that's just seeing the games this fall. But taking 30 kids, it's intriguing. There's a lot of content for you to discuss because Lord only knows that's a lot of players. But I'm a little nervous when I see the 30 number. The continuity, especially like Johnny got more NIL than I did, et cetera. And the reason I'm concerned about that, I witnessed that firsthand covering Florida State. They made a bunch of big name acquisitions for Bama, Georgia, schools like that last year, and it caused some chaos. I'm not saying they went the exact same route at UCLA, but the portal can either help you like it did Florida State in 23, or it can kill you like it did Florida State in 24. We'll see what happens with the Bruins.
And the big thing for the Bruins, I know we talked about this before we started this pod. What does UCLA have on the offensive line that could help Nico? And did they address that in the transfer portal, or are they a year away from that when Nico might not even be a Bruin in 2026?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I talked to you about this off air. Like, the elite programs recruit elite offensive linemen out of the high school ranks. And that's pretty much it. They'll add one guy here or there, maybe a center. Like Miami's got a great O-line. Every year they take a center. They want a senior at the pivot. Okay, that's great. But UCLA has recruited O-line so poorly, especially in their own backyard, probably long before Deshaun got there to Westwood, that they're behind the eight ball. Florida State's in the exact same boat, ironically, and they took 4 kids out of the portal. They're going to start. They might all leave after this year. Well, you're kind of back to square one. At some point, you got to play the younger guys and take your lumps. Nobody wants to do that, but until you get an experienced line, it's pretty hard. So I need to see how that gels. And remember, Nico and some of these guys that came in the portal, they didn't even practice together in pads in spring. So they got to get used to his voice inflections, all the counts, how he leads. There's so many small things that come with quarterback and O-line. Even if you got the best players, not having spring ball leaves a lot to be desired. So I'm a little skeptical there too.
My question for you is, for Tennessee's O-line last year, the one that Nico played behind, where would you rate them? And were they a great O-line, obviously like national championship worthy, maybe not, but where would you put them? And is there a way the Bruins could maybe reach that if they're like an average O-line?
They were above average. They had a few guys that were pretty good. One of the kids, like Kate Mays or something, I forget the kid's name, but NFL guy, but they didn't have consistency at one of the tackles, and that was a problem. They had a few guys banged up, but they had more talent than what UCLA did. They had some road graders. Now, they also had a big-time running back. So they just ran a lot of really generic inside plays, inside zone, etc., and they were in a lot of 2nd and 5s. But that was Nico's first year. They needed that. As I noted earlier in the pod, UCLA, they may not have the same line as Tennessee, but this is going to be Nico's 2nd year as being a quarterback. I get it that he's not evolved for 2 years in a row, so it's a different offense and all that. But just the growth and maturity as a person, being a year older from like 19 to 20, is a big deal. I know the difference between me every year is out because I matured pretty slow. Like it matters. And I think he'll handle adversity better. And I also think that, again, like I also said, he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. He's going to find a way, whether it's running the football a little more, whether it's keeping plays alive, giving his receivers time, even if the offensive line's not great. That part I'm not worried about. It's the run game and also Nico just taking big shots. He cannot get hurt. I don't think UCLA is in a position to survive Nico missing any significant time.
And I think UCLA fans remember from last year, Ethan Garbers, obviously not in the same realm as Nico, but he took shots and he had no run game. And the run game was when Ethan Garbers would scramble around. Now it's Tino Sinceri's job to manufacture some productive run game if they don't have the right offensive line. Now they have a new O-line coach with Andy Kwan. I think they're trying to address it. Micah Smith, close to your own backyard. I'm not sure where you are in regards to Vero Beach, but if the Bruins can land him in 2026, that's the future. That just doesn't help them in 2025.
Yeah, I know. We call him Champ. That's his nickname. He's a stud. He's been a kid we've known about since he was a freshman in high school. Vero is a very good program, very loyal. That kid has been recruited by everybody. Ohio State's wanted him forever. He's the kind of guy that can plug and play at UCLA. So you need to start getting some of those kids. So that's as important as a recruit as you will get. And as a reference point, in this past NFL draft, 8 of the first 32 picks were offensive linemen. Coincidence? No. If you don't have big guys up front, you're probably going to suck. At the NFL level, protecting that quarterback is a very big premium anyway. And it's going to be that way at UCLA and every other college football program. So they could get Champ. I mean, that would be the steal. Like, he's an East Coast of Florida kid from a town that's out of the way. It's not near anything. It's the end of Highway 60 on the ocean. It's just middle of nowhere. So for him to go from there to UCLA would be wild. Like Vero Beach has nothing in common with LA. Zero.
Other than Dodger Town, obviously, the longtime spring training home.
That is cool. That's a cool point.
That would be the only thing, but that's not going to affect some high school kid in 2025 going to UCLA, I would think. But that would be the only connection I could think. But that would be a great get for UCLA to get a national recruiting, go all the way to Florida and steal somebody when the big dogs are going after him.
Oh, 100%.
My fear is, which is probably what happened in the offseason during the early signing period, last second, those pocketbooks, the checks get a little bigger. Obviously, we're waiting to see what NIL looks like in the future, but UCLA can't exactly give a bigger check than somebody else at the last minute changing their minds.
Yeah, the NIL thing, especially with the House settlement, we don't have any precedent to go on, so we're all guessing here. I don't know how that's going to work, because that if it gets figured out, and asking any judge or Congress to do anything that I agree with is probably not very likely. And I feel most of the people in the United States agree with that, considering our Congress sucks, but it's coming at one point in time or not. And it's going to be $15 to $17 million a year for most of the major college football programs, UCLA included. How do you spend that? Do you prioritize offensive line? There's all kinds of things. Somebody's going to offer him 7 figures, probably. And it just is what it is. Will that be UCLA? I have no idea. But again, Ohio State really wants it. Ohio State doesn't miss very often. So we'll see how that goes.
They don't miss very often. And before we head to the last segment, I'll let you stew on a question. Who won or who might win the UCLA-Tennessee quarterback swap? And have we seen a program ever get their current quarterback and their future quarterback in the same transfer class? We'll let you stew on that for just a second. Third and final segment of Locked On UCLA podcast. Zach with you guys with Brian Smith, locked on basically everything, but mainly the portal, Locked On Seminoles. It's been great having you on the first 2 segments. So as I teased in that last segment, UCLA, Tennessee, we've never seen a college football trade. Of course, being in LA, we're used to the Dodgers doing a lot of trades. The Lakers obviously got Luka. Maybe not in that same realm, but it made national headlines in college football. And when I was out of town and I was on spring break, next thing you know, Nico to UCLA. Okay, wait. Oh, this is happening. It's official. And then Joey Aguilar goes to Tennessee. Is UCLA getting the better end of the deal based on value, or is Tennessee?
That is a crazy, crazy scenario, because it's not just the player. It's what you get with it. I'm still not really comfy with everything going around Nico, but it is what it is. That's family stuff. But I like Nico a lot, and he's a good dude. I don't think the players and the staff are having problems with Nico. I really don't. Now, I don't know Aguilar. I don't know Joey. I don't know him at all. But he was a pretty good player. Then he transferred to UCLA. Obviously didn't get a chance to play or whatever. But he went down the last year, and they had different coaches and all this. But, man, I'm telling you, like, I'm familiar with the Tennessee program. That is a pressure cooker. And they're at a point now where their fans are expecting them to, like, beat Bama and stuff like that. I'm not sure. Their defense is taking a tiny bit of a step back. Their offensive line probably won't be quite as good. Quarterback didn't go through spring, and you've got an SEC schedule. I'm going UCLA. Not picking on Tennessee, but their expectations are just totally different.
I think it's fair to say, even if you're a UCLA fan, just sitting here watching, the expectations, especially having spent the summer in Knoxville, having seen UCLA play in Knoxville, completely different. It's completely different, obviously, stadium attendance, everything. It's just a different ballpark, and that's why it made it dramatic. If Nico does the opposite thing, leaves UCLA and goes to Tennessee, if it's the reverse situation, it's probably not as big of a story. But because he leaves the hotbed of the SEC, hotbed of college football in that area, and then comes to Los Angeles, that's what makes it, I think, more of a story than if it was the reverse, I think.
I couldn't agree more. You said it very well. SEC fans are not used to losing quarterbacks to UCLA.
To UCLA, no.
I mean, it's just not. This is, I'm trying to think, Zach, maybe about the weirdest transfer situation I follow basketball and football, like, about ever. I mean, how it happened, him skipping practice, blah, blah, blah. Out of character for him, but again, people around. There's a lot of stuff we'll never know the full detail to. So we'll see, but Tennessee's expectations being that high, I'm a little concerned. I think Joey will do pretty well there, but Tennessee fans have a very narrow tunnel vision view of what they want, because they've not won it by the level they expect for a very long time, and they're not going to make it there this year. So I'm going to go UCLA.
Another thing to lead forward into this discussion. Have you ever seen a team? I know the transfer portal era, it feels like it's been forever. It's brought us maybe grays. We've lost. Who knows what's been going on? It's actually not been that long that's been dominating college football. Have we seen a team like UCLA get a new quarterback in Joey Aguilar, replace that quarterback by spring, and in the same transfer portal window, go for the future QB, which happens to be Nico's younger brother, Madden, all in one fell swoop? Is that going to work? Has it been a precedent? I don't think there's been something like what UCLA's done, trying to set themselves up for the present and the future in the way they have.
Ole Miss would be the closest. Of course, we're talking about Lane Kiffin, and he's his own entity. They've had multiple transfer quarterbacks, so that'd be something, but not to this magnitude. They haven't had a kid transfer in with Nico as well. Like, he's a pure 5-star talent. So that'd be the closest, but otherwise, no, I think UCLA is top of the board.
And I know you do a lot of lists. You have top 26s coming out already. You've got some of the best guys in the portal. If you were to make a list, I haven't read this, but if you made a list of like dark horse candidates, those guys with the chip on their shoulder, not the Nicos who have the 5-star chip on their shoulder, but the guys that we're talking about that would be the steals potentially. Is there anybody on this list of 90 billion transfers coming in for UCLA that could maybe impress, maybe fit a dark horse candidate? I know you like Javian Thomas, but you think he's more high end. What do you think for the Bruins?
I think Javian's going to be an NFL football player. I saw him play live. Like, his speed's ridiculous. Man, they got so many kids. If he ever figures it out, Pierce Clarkson could be, because he's got all kinds of talent. But
do you think he could position switch? My thought is he might switch positions at some point if he's such an athlete. But obviously kids want to be QBs first.
Yeah, like if you try to switch him at this point, he'll probably transfer again, would be my guess.
Yeah.
Maybe a little, I don't know if it's completely under the radar, but Anthony Jones, the kid from Michigan State. Number one, it's a position of need. UCLA needs better line play on both sides, and he's a defensive end. He played at Michigan State, did all right. If he can take that next step and be like a 7-8 sack guy, he could be a guy that ends up getting drafted after next year. But I don't know the roster well enough. Looking at these guys, like, they got Roderick Pleasant from Oregon. He's not the biggest corner. He's solid.
He's fast, though.
Oh, God, he can run. I mean, he shot out of a cannon. But, they got a few guys that are good. Jameer Johnson played a little bit at Indiana as a corner, maybe. They got a bunch of good players, but who takes that big step up? KD Arnold, the big offensive tackle at Jack State, you're not getting any, shall we say, prestige at Jack State. But if you go to UCLA, you're in the mecca of entertainment. If you start playing well, you're going to get attention, not just from the Big Ten and this and that, but NFL scouts. So they've got a few candidates. I just need to see it because, again, they took a bunch of good players. I just don't know if they got enough elite ones. We'll see.
FanDuel has UCLA at 5.5 wins. That includes the Nico transfer, and I think that was one of the main reasons. It started at 4.5, went to 5.5. I know I'm putting you on the spot here. Is this roster so in flux that it could go either way? Or would you feel comfortable leaning one way or the other? Over or under 5.5 wins for the Bruins from FanDuel?
I would say over without looking at the schedule. I would think Nico's at least one, if not two more wins for you. He's going to make a few plays. And again, his feet will be a part of it. Sometimes just getting out of a sack and throwing it away is as important a play as there is, because that might keep you in field goal range. That might keep the momentum, might do both. It's just a rare physical trait that has nothing to do with coaching. And I'm not saying Deshaun can't coach, but sometimes you need your player to be better than theirs. The other thing is, like, I don't think anybody's going to like circle them on the schedule. They're probably like, if they beat Penn State, would it shock me? No. Should they? Also no. But that's also the history of college football. They got to come all the way from Happy Valley out there, if I remember right. Are they going to?
Yeah, it's going to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, that's a terribly long trip. You never know. If they catch them sleeping, maybe they get up on them. Maybe Drew Auer has a bad day or something. It's possible, but I would expect Penn State to run over them because they're so good up front. They might have the best O-line in the country. But if they're a little bit banged up or they're a little sleepy in how they play, it wouldn't shock me. Several of these transfers that they have to 30, which is such a big number, they're going to be important. How do they assimilate into the UCLA culture? How do they stay healthy? Do they, figure it out at every position they need, especially in the trenches? A lot of questions between now and the end of fall camp.
Well, it wouldn't shock me if I bug you again to come on the show because you've been great all show long. Brian, thanks for coming on again. Again, you can find him various ways. Quickly, Brian, one more time, how can they find you?
Spotify, Apple, and any other place you can find your podcast, just like Locked On UCLA, Locked On the Portal. We study recruiting right now more than anything else. Between now and mid-July, it is nonstop. Every day there's going to be commitments talking about their commitment lists for schools, Texas, UCLA, whoever you want. And we're also going to talk about the actual breakdowns of players. I do a lot of different lists, film reviews, and stuff like that. So Locked On the Portal is your source for recruiting.
Absolutely. We'll have Brian on again, I'm sure. Thanks for tuning in to Locked On UCLA. Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer signing off with Brian Smith. Go Bruins.